Joining me today on Brief Encounters is Alfred Biehler. Alfred is a seasoned innovation leader with experience everywhere from Microsoft to Google and a whole bunch of other things. He's a startup founder, a passionate advocate for building cultures of innovation, and we're delighted to have him today on the Brief Encounters podcast. Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's really a privilege. I am looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Alfred, you've had a truly fascinating journey, especially across those two tech giants, but actually lots of other really, really interesting things. Tell us a bit about what drew you into this world of innovation and change and increasingly AI and other things.
Thank you. What a privilege to go down memory lane and look at all the blessings I've had at different places. I think what was quite interesting about my journey, and I can't claim that I architected it like this deliberately, but I fluctuated from big business to tiny business to big business to tiny business. So I had my own business before I joined Microsoft. I had my own business, worked at a tiny business belonging to somebody else, then Microsoft, then as founder of a new startup that spun out 3 businesses, and then all tiny, and then again big Google, and now I'm on my own again, right? And so that fluctuation is fascinating because it highlights the differences. It highlights the good things about both, and it highlights the challenges of both. So that certainly drew me into how can you get the best bits from the other side into the relevant worlds. And in my role, both in Microsoft and Google, I initially was talking a lot of tech and selling tech effectively to customers. And out of that, you could see that the tech could really do fantastic stuff. But frequently, it's not the lack of installing the executable that makes a difference in the company. It is all the stuff around it, right? So that's the journey that led me to where I am now. Curious about the intersection between technology and the human interaction with that, and how that fosters or hinders innovation.
And in heading up innovation at Google, which just sounds like a kind of enormous role to have, just paint a picture for the audience of what did that role mean, and kind of what was your mission within the organization, and how did your work kind of play through into the products and services that they're building today?
So the title head of innovation is something I dreamt of myself. That was never something that HR assigned to me. It's never a job that I applied for. I as I say, I was for a long time a salesperson of tech. But because I got interested in the things that make it work and doesn't make it work, I started to add more value around that and talk more about that. And I started to introduce myself as the guru around innovation. And colleagues started to invite me to talk about that. And more customers and internal teams wanted to know about, but how do we make this work? How does it work? So, truth be told, until I left Google in November last year, I was on the books as a data management specialist. So every year I had to pass some other exam to check that box to say, yes, I am. And I could do it, but I tried my best to hide it from everybody because I didn't want to be called upon as that. So I can't claim that I'm responsible for the innovation of Google, by no means. In fact, I would argue good organizations don't have a head of innovation. A good organization cultivates a culture where everybody can contribute to the innovation.
And let's talk about that for a moment. I'm really curious as well, having seen the kind of startup side where innovation is kind of everything, and the kind of ease with which innovation happens is kind of a little bit easier to have a small group of people kind of working on one thing. And you take the level of scale you saw at Microsoft and Google, and some of us will recognize those kind of large corporates with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees. What was different between the two, and how did you sort of make innovation or help make innovation thrive in a business which is really at massive scale?
Contrary to many experts on innovation, I see innovation very broadly. I don't see it as just you bring out a new product that nobody's ever seen before. I see it as any level of process improvement, right? There might be somebody in operations and they need to crank a handle every day. and they realize, but it's actually wasting some effort because the handle cranking results in a report that nobody ever reads. That individual spotting that and suggesting a different way of doing it and trying something new, I see as an innovator in a big organization. So your question is the difference between the small business and a massive business at scale. I think there are lots of differences, but some of the things that come to mind is that in a small business, the communication and the understanding as to why you're doing it and where you're going and what the challenges are so much clearer, because all 6 of you have been talking about that yesterday over dinner, and you know that there's a problem there and you need to fix that. If you don't fix that, the whole thing is going to blow up. And therefore, everybody pulls together to fix that problem. When you get to 100,000 people, unless, and in most organizations this doesn't happen well, unless the senior leadership does a fantastic job to continuously articulate the vision, the purpose, the mission, how it relates to the heads of departments, and all of those cascaded down so that my boss makes sure that I know what's important and what's not important, and then give me the freedom within that to say, okay, because I know this is important, that's not, I can stop doing that and I can do more of this. Then that gives me the agency as an individual in a massive organization to actually continue that agility, and that makes a small business reach innovative status quicker. It's because everybody does the right thing as opposed to doing the thing, but they're not even doing the right thing regardless of whether they do it right or not. So communication and that understanding of the problem is super crucial. Typically, big organizations end up having lots of hierarchy driven by OKRs that's not related to where the business needs to go, that is not dynamically changing as the market changes, that is paying people a bonus based on the historical structure from last year and 6 years ago, that actually breaks the ability of the business to do well. So that is the big difference. In a small business, you've got that understanding, and therefore you can agile and pivot. Big business tends to be large and slow moving because there are too many stakeholders that feel like, I'm going to hold on to this bit that is safe. It's that safety net. Right? What fascinating thing I've seen in us as humans is, if I have nothing to my name and I sleep on the streets, and I've got a pair of shoes that I take off at night and I put them next to me, I go and sleep, and if they're gone, they're gone. Tomorrow I'll go and find others in a bin, right? I'm not saying this with disrespect for people in that position. I'm highlighting that people with very little, are less fearful to lose things than the big organization with a massive brand that are really nervous about, well, will this damage my brand if one of my employees go and have a podcast somewhere, right? So the counterintuitively, the more we have, the more we seem to be fearful of what we can lose. And that is something, if you look at a small business where they have nothing, they've got no brand, they've got no existing customers, they're happy to try something, break it, try something else, try it again, pivot to a different offering, etc. as they see the market changes. Big business don't tend to have that willingness to take the risk and take the chances.
A lot of things you're saying resonate with me as someone who's in the scale-up phase. So we're certainly not at the same scale as Google, but we're now, a scaling business, and those things creep up quite fast. That we've now got something to lose, and we've got revenue, and we could lose it, and the communication challenge kind of pans out. I'm just kind of curious. You mentioned kind of the importance of communication in leadership. Just kind of curious of those leaders that you have seen and worked with, what are the traits that have allowed that kind of long-term risk-taking, innovation embracing approach versus the hit your number, get your OKR this quarter, let's not take any risk, and let's make sure we don't lose what we have mindset? Like what makes the difference in leadership?
What a privilege throughout the career to see both exceptionally good and really bad leaders, because you learn from both, right? But I'll highlight to you some of the best ones with regard to that open communication and clarity. Larry and Sergey, who founded Google, really demonstrated that like I've never seen before. Eric Schmidt was also instrumental at the time when he was sort of providing parental oversight to Larry and Sergey. Um, uh, there are moments in that. Let me give you one. I remember at the time Google had this weekly meeting called TGIF, and I remember Eric Schmidt being on stage talking to the whole organization live, and any question would be acceptable, and he would respond with any of those in a frank and open way. So at the one point, there was an engineer that stood up and said to Eric, that decision you made was really rubbish. It was stupid. We should not have done that. Right now, he's talking to the CEO and the chair of the board. So in many organizations, that wouldn't be okay. And maybe that's not something to strive for, that kind of tone. But in any case, because this was an engineer, he had other skills. His communication skills was perhaps not the best. Temptation for leadership would be to counter that with similar inappropriate communication style. But Eric Schmidt said to him, well, thanks for your opinion. I hear that. It's your opinion versus mine. I happen to be the chairperson. I'll go with mine unless you can bring me evidence to the contrary. Bring me some data. And you can see the engineer sort of shrink down in his seat. Within a few minutes, the engineer, hand in the air, Eric. And Eric said, yes. And the engineer opens his laptop, points it at Eric and said, look, here's the evidence that this is a thing. And Eric looked at him and said, okay. So we go with your idea now because you provided evidence. Now, most leaders would feel threatened. An engineer challenged them. They had to go with an opinion. They don't know what's right. But Eric, in that case, didn't feel threatened. He asked for the data. He got the data, and he's changed his mind. Or there was another case where Larry and Sergey made a decision about a policy change, and there was uproar in the company. And we had a load of all hands meetings and discussions and lawyers piping up and everything else. We had strikes in the business. We had people shutting down services. That was the extent of upset they had. And the punchline to this is they came back on stage after 24 hours since they announced the policy. So all of this upset was dealt with in a very short period of time. They came back on stage and said, we made a mistake. Thanks for pointing it out. Let's change direction. Right? So that is the kind of open communication and willingness to make a mistake, willingness to listen, being fearless that I think good leaders show. And I have a lot of sympathy with CEOs that don't have that willingness to take that risk because it's their job on the line, it's their reputation on the line. They will be in the newspaper tomorrow if they say the wrong thing. But not doing it means you're depriving your organization from the information to make the right decision. So that's the trade-off.
Super interesting. Let's talk a little bit about AI. One of the big debates at the moment are who's going to be the big winner in the whole AI world, and there's incredible things happening in Microsoft and Google and elsewhere. Specifically regarding Google, kind of what do you like about how they're approaching AI today, and their general positioning in the space? Kind of what's your take on where Google goes with this?
It's worth saying I care a lot about AI. I spend a lot of time with it. I'm very optimistic about what it can do and what it's already doing. And I am playing with other products as well. That's not by Google, but I am biased because I have gone through this transition with AI in the last 13 years at Google, and I know and use their tools. Right, not exclusively. I've got ChatGPT installed on my phone, but actually, frankly, I always use Gemini. And I'm not speaking on behalf of Google, just to make it clear. And I have no need to promote their products. I think Google has got a track record where they had to sort out how to do things at scale, how to understand data, how to predict things for many, many years. All right. Wind back 15, 20 years, Google already had to figure out which machines are likely to break next, predict that, and do something about it. Google had to predict the weather in order to know about the cooling that's needed in the data centers. Google had to predict what will sell, which video will be looked at, which one will be ignored. And all of that gave Google a lot of chops to understand machine learning. So the history that Google has with building machine learning is incredible. And if you know the large language model revolution, Google contributed an enormous amount to that. But that was really out of the basis of trying to build Translate, a good Translate engine. And that happened to open up other opportunities. One of the best brains on the planet, Jeff Dean, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll see there's a gazillion things he built for Google, from search all the way through to algorithms, and there's a lot of folklore stories as well as to how he fixed global scale problems with a few lines of code. Brilliant brain. But I remember him standing on stage. This must be 15 years ago, at one of these Friday meetings, and he was asked the question, "What's next?" And I had sort of expectation it's going to be flying, I don't know what. But his response actually surprised me. He said, machines talking, machines understanding talking, machines seeing, machines knowing what to do on the back of that. And at the time, it felt to me like, that's not that interesting. We already got dictation machines. We already have got text-to-speech. But that seemed to have been truthful, right? So you asked me about Google's position. I think Google's legacy there, the amount of data they have, the experience they've got, puts them in a very, very strong position. Of course, they've got challenges as well, but I'm excited to see what comes from their world.
You mentioned voice and vision, so this kind of, we've all got used to ChatGPT and Claude and text-based interfaces where we're still kind of hacking at our keyboards and getting some output, but kind of just tell us a bit more about voice and vision. What are the potential kind of applications of that in real world that you could see coming?
I am looking forward to smart home devices that are just more intelligent, more clever. I mean, it's technically not that hard to build, but nobody's done it yet. I'm involved in a local church. We do a lot of singing, and there's somebody clicking slides with the words on a song. Think karaoke. And that still requires a human to click the next slide, or a pre-configured karaoke thing where you need to sort of follow the words, but you can't. Machines can already figure this out. I love how Spotify knows which songs are similar to the ones. I found a track yesterday on Spotify that I really liked. Brand new thing from an artist that's got nothing else published. I said I wanted songs like this, and he gave me other songs that was like that. It's just fascinating how Spotify can do that, right? So I think also the interesting thing for me in this revolution of generative AI and large language models is, for many years, software engineers have been saying software can do anything, right? If you got a problem and you spend enough software engineering hours on it, you can solve any problem with software engineering. But now that changed to be software engineering can still do everything, but now it doesn't require those massive investments. It still does, but it will get less, right? As large language models are better at understanding a problem and articulating it in a different language, happen to be a programming language, I think we will be able to solve more of the world's problems quicker, because there's now this human-computer interface that is becoming much, much better than just a mouse or a keyboard, but becoming aware of the context, aware of the problems. Gemini Live does an incredible job where you point the camera and your phone at the world you're walking through, and you can ask it questions. So, where did I leave my glasses? Or how many people is at this barbecue? Or what's the next chore that I need to do? And it will say, oh, you're running out of crisps, right? Do something about that. Your guest might be needing that. It's just fantastic how that kind of technology is becoming more powerful. And I'm expecting that actually that will become pervasive across work, that we would be able to have an assistant that is intelligent, that can help us do stuff better. Right now, we've got an inkling of what that looks like with the chat interface, and it's already amazing, but I think it will get better.
It does feel, I mean, there's a kind of amateur view on this, but it does feel that those that own the smartphone layer, so basically Google and Apple, have a strategic advantage in that, there are only so many devices you actually want to wear. I think I'm currently at 2 with a watch and a phone, but it does feel that from a position where you already have that device, that this kind of invisible layer of contextual understanding of what you do and how you do it, and giving you these insights, it feels you've already kind of got something in your pocket that could help with that.
That's true. It does help, but it's not the full answer. So I think I think the work under the bonnet, the algorithm, you could quite easily plug one in and plug another one out, right? You can quite easily change the user interface. The talk about glasses that's suddenly surfacing again with Google working on glasses again, and virtual reality, augmented reality. I think that talks to some extent to the user interface could change, right? Especially because we're no longer stuck to a keyboard, and we might not be any longer stuck to a touch screen, right? So I know Microsoft even 25 years ago had this vision of the living room, which had a photo of the living room without any devices that you could see. I like that. I think we will get more and more towards that. I would definitely still like to have a living room where I can turn the devices off, even if they're hidden. I would love to be able to say, now I'm off.
I want to just pick up on one thing you said, which was, if software can do anything, but actually what it takes to build software is going to become easier and easier. How do you see that playing into innovation? The reason I ask is certainly within Juro as an organization, we see more and more people able to build things that previously there were huge barriers to build. So it might be vibe coding a landing page or a really simple internal tool where previously it was go and get engineering time and do the thing and raise the tickets. And now it's like you can actually just create. Like, does this unlock innovation in folks in organizations who previously just weren't able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So key to innovation is you need to be able to have a really quick way to iterate from idea to testing. So it could be scribble on a piece of white paper. It could be a block of wood that you then hold forward as this is what the device looks like. Would you use it? Would you spend money on it? But for many potential future customers of that product, they need to use the imagination to know, okay, if I see this block of wood, how would it look like in my home? Whereas if you could, for not much more effort or time or cost, have an idea and have a prototype working, then you can test it and see, actually, there's no market for this. Let's move on. Or this doesn't really solve the problem. It highlights a different problem. Let's drop that and do the next thing. So the biggest challenge in big organizations with innovation is they put forward a £3 million budget. They have got a 4-year program and they go through a thing. And at the end of 4 years, they figure out that was a waste and they stop. The opposite extreme of that is somebody's got an idea. They quickly prototype it today. They show it to somebody tomorrow. It works or it doesn't work. It gets canned or it gets progressed. But not wait 3 years to realize you made a mistake. So I think the ability to rapidly prototype thing is really useful.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about legal teams. So I think we have, hopefully lots of people listening who are in legal teams thinking hard about how they innovate. Let's maybe start with automation and AI within those teams. Where do you see the potential there, and what should teams be thinking about in terms of driving that change within their in-house legal organization?
I think many industries, many roles, but also legal roles will change dramatically. Specifically in the private practice side of law, I have encountered a lawyer in my preparation for this a few days ago, who is completely unaware of AI and how it will touch them and how it could be useful to them, and I think they're in for a surprise. So I think traditional law, the output was measured as a document, a contract. And when the contract was released, that's what you got paid for. That's a thing that secured you. Lawyers add so much more value than that. But that's not been valued this far, right? It's not been measured. It's not been like the most important thing for me when I go and speak to a lawyer, whether it's in-house or external, is can I trust them? And there's no way for me currently to know that, other than go to a central registration body and see, yes, this person is registered. That's the sum total, or maybe a friend recommendation. But I have no other way of knowing whether I can trust that individual. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things that legal world can add, is to become beacons of trust, to become the center of excellence, understand the relevant and the relative risks of something, to understand how to mitigate some of those, right? So I think the history has done lawyers no favor in pigeonholing some, again, not in-house, but private practice lawyers into 6-minute chunks of time and big, long text. Because those two things, both the time it takes to produce a long document and the producing a long document, is no longer the differentiator. The value that a lawyer can add is so much more. So go figure out, what is it, the value that you add in your organization, and give that more. I think it's really important to get better at communicating as well, right? It's so easy for anybody, whether it's a software engineer or a finance person or a lawyer, to stick within their jargon and not be able to really communicate. But I think as it gets cheaper to produce a legal document and quicker, I think that communication skill that explains why it is important and where it's going and what the risks are and where people should be thinking about alternative challenges is really what's going to differentiate one lawyer from another one.
It's really interesting. Obviously, I come from a legal background, right? So the kind of risk management is in the DNA of a lawyer. And we're talking here about innovation and kind of embracing risk and change. And we definitely see two types of lawyer emerging. So there's kind of one type is fully embracing of this. And they'll be doing stuff which was unthinkable a year ago. So, in Juro, you can now use agents in Slack and Teams to mark up NDAs. So someone says, I got an NDA lawyer for a markup, and the agent replies and it's done the markup. The lawyer's literally just only setting the playbook. And then you have the second type, and I think the second type, there's a sort of a default to finding all of the reasons why that couldn't be done, right? And there's something in our mindset as lawyers, we're really good at picking holes in things. We're really good at finding what's the problem. What's your advice to that second set of lawyers, and what needs to change in this legal mindset to help folks embrace the change that's going to come?
I will respond to that in a second, as to what I would recommend for that second chunk that's concerned about the risk. But just a quick story that emphasizes your point about the world that's changing quickly, also for legal firms. I read an article that in Arizona, a few weeks ago, there was a court case where the victim, who was killed prior to the court case, and that's why the court case is there, was virtually in court to, well, not really give evidence, but to address the perpetrator and say, here's how I felt, here's what I was doing, here's what I could have had if you didn't kill me. And so where the world and where law will go is, I think, open for us to still explore and see. So what's my advice to a lawyer who is concerned about the risk? So I have been thinking about that a lot. And I think, let me just remove it from law specifically, but you'll see that it applies. I had a conversation with a security expert some years ago in one of these big tech firms. And I wanted to install a little bit of networking thing at a local school where I was a governor. And I wanted some advice. And I asked a question in an open forum, and this security person came and said, I'll help you. But they didn't really say that. They couldn't communicate well. And like a good paranoid security person, they were just paranoid about everything. And that can actually stop me from getting a good solution, right? What a good lawyer can do is not say, here are all the risks, because there are many everywhere. I think what's most valuable for lawyers, if we can say, there are many risks, but here's the 3 that you cannot ignore, right? So not try and find all the risks, but assess all the risk, decide what's priority, and highlight those. And beyond saying no, I was really surprised when I look at the Law Society website, and even the Law Society describe lawyers sometimes is seen as the Department of No. I mean, if that's on the Law Society, then that gives you permission to be that. But when you say no, frequently people will just find a way around it. What's probably much more useful is actually to educate the people to say, if you do that, here's the repercussions. That's why you probably don't want to do this. Then they won't do it because they realize there's a problem. And next time when they don't have to ask you, they also won't do it because they still know the problem. So I think that it's a shift from saying no or just saying there's too many risks, by saying here are the risks you need to understand and communicate why that's a risk and how that can impact someone.
In our experience, there are so many lawyers who don't want to be in the Department of No, right? It's from a job satisfaction perspective, you actually don't really want to be a blocker of business growth. At the same time, there's the balancing of being someone whose job and mission it is to control the major risks. So how you've articulated is really kind of clever way through, still achieving your outcome, but just doing it in a slightly different way. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, and before we wrap, is many of our customers are being told by CEOs and CFOs, who they typically report to, that they need to increase automation within their teams. None of them are getting any new headcounts. They're being told to do more with less, and they're being told expressly, please do more AI. And what the leaders then, the general counsels and the CLOs are then figuring out is, okay, beyond do AI and automation, how can I lead a culture of innovation and change in my team? What's your advice to those leaders in how they should actually drive a more innovative culture within legal?
Winding back just a little bit, you stated how you, and actually many of the lawyers I've met, really have this desire to innovate. And I love that, right? I love that. So actually, automation is a great way to get away from doing the stuff that is just churn, handle cranking. I mean, I'm also not paid to sell Juro products, but I know that yours does a great job of taking some of the handle cranking away, and that frees up time for a lawyer to focus on the things that are really important, right? Figure out the risks, figure out the priorities. So what's my advice? If you're in a team and you want to encourage an innovation mindset in the team, the first thing is, I'm serious about this, is start to say thank you. By saying thank you, you invite people to contribute, right? And it pauses before you say, but it's not going to work, or no, we've tried that, or we haven't got the funds for that. So the first thing is start to say thank you. Just pause. When somebody tells you something, pause, say thank you, right? You want to encourage feedback from the people around you. So you need to create a safe space for that. And the thank you does that. One of the ways you can create that safe space for people, let me just be clear on the safe space. I'm not talking about a fluffy, warm, everybody cuddly environment, and that's required for business. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if there's a problem in your organization, you want somebody able to say, there's a problem. And if they don't feel that they can do it safely, they won't. The problem will continue to exist, but you won't know about it. So you want people to be willing to say there's a problem. So you want to create that safe space. So saying thank you is a starting point. The second thing is you need to show that you sometimes make mistakes, right? By you acknowledging, saying, I ask you all to do this, but I actually now realize that was maybe overreaction. Maybe we should pull back a little bit. Or I said no AI. Maybe we should just not do any AI with customer or with sensitive information. Or maybe we do it only Friday afternoon after 4 p.m. just to dabble with it. Whatever the decision is. But acknowledge that you make mistakes. Along with that, acknowledge the things you don't know. It's not true that you know everything. It's not true, right? Yet the world we live in, and especially the legal world, there's a need to sort of present it as this is fact. If you're not sure, be willing to say, well, I think this is it, but I'm not sure. You don't have to do that publicly or in front of a court, but you can say that in your team. So I'm not sure about this thing. What do you think? Invite them for that feedback. It's about creating that environment where the smarts in your team, the problem in your business, can come forward and say, but I thought of this, or I think about that. Let me just give you one more. Incentives. If your lawyers are being paid to not make mistakes, you're never going to hear about a mistake. If they incentivize to try something, even if it doesn't work, you'll get more people trying the right thing, that innovation mindset.
And it's really inspiring, I think, as a lawyer as well. I think we probably have a lot of listeners who've gone on that journey in private practice, billing by 6-minute increments, very severe consequences if any mistake is made. The need to present as someone who kind of knows it all and is all-knowing and all-wise is, especially when you then go into the in-house environment in particular, where other teams are operating in a fail-fast, fast iteration, innovative environment. It's very empowering. There's lots of customers who have gone in that environment and thrived. And I think those actionable tips, I really love to say thank you to people on. I've seen this play out, and the difference where you have the openness and communication from leadership and from whoever it may be, a lawyer or someone else in the business, to embrace the change. It's at the end of the day, it's what I think a lot of lawyers have gone in-house for and want to embrace. Alfred, thank you so much for being on Briefing Council. It's been a fascinating chat across Google, Microsoft, legal, AI, and a whole bunch of other things. Where can folks find out more about you and your work?
Thank you. Thanks for that opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation. My day job is I'm advising boards and senior leadership teams on this kind of stuff. So my website, www.biehler.co.uk, my surname, and we'll have the information where to get hold of me.
Awesome. It's been great to talk to you, Alfred. Thank you.